Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Nichole's Write Together with in Copperplate. So as I have been explaining, Symbiosis event, it is about community, it's about sharing our love for lettering, and it's not really a workshop. So you will not expect Nichole to be like teaching or lecturing. So she will be demonstrating, there will be things that we can do together. So we just want you to chill, enjoy yourself, enjoy the people around, and feel free to chat in the conversation. If you have a question, you can type it there, and then either Judith or myself will direct it to Nichole when she pauses, for a breath. So we don't disturb her flow. Okay, so over to you, Nichole. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Thank you for joining me this evening or morning. Today, our Copperplate Write Together is a very simple one, a very casual one. So there's no pressure to really write notes or perform during this session. What I have prepared though is just a simple text. So this text, let me show it on screen. Okay. I will also copy and paste it in the chat so everyone can see. I've picked out, these texts for our practice today because they are the texts that I've used for the exhibition. So I thought it would be quite appropriate because it's a Symbiosis exhibition. We can write together anyway. So the first poem that we are going to write together will be this one here. Okay, and the title of this poem is That It Will Never Come Again by Emily Dickenson. Okay. If you don't have any tools around you, maybe I'll just go through very simply what you can get yourself prepared. Guidelines are great if you have it along with you. If you don't have,
Are you using 212 or what is your proportion today?
It doesn't, I'm using 212 today because that's what I have on hand.
Okay.
But if you have 3:3 ratio guidelines, that's what too. So let me just focus my screen. Okay, I hope it's clear now. Okay, so what Dorothy meant by 212 was, oops, 2 unit, 1 unit, and 2 units. Yeah. So that's what she meant by 212. So if you have guidelines or guide sheets that that you can print out, that'll be good to have. If you don't, all you just need is a ruler and just write simple baselines. I think that's good enough, even if you don't have printed guidelines. The whole point is for us to just practice along and write together. So you don't have to be so precise if you don't have all the tools around you. Okay, so begin by writing That It Will Never Come Again. So whenever I use 212 guidelines, I actually don't use the full height because I normally do 3:3 ratio. So whenever I use a 212 guideline, I do my capital letters a little bit shorter.
I have just dropped into the chat 212 guides
Okay.
X height. Yeah. So if you want, you can use that and print off or for future reference.
Does anyone need me to maybe go through, like anyone completely new to calligraphy that needs me to really cover some of the details here? Like how do you get started on writing? I can go through a little bit of that if anyone needs some help. Otherwise, it will be just a write along today.
Hey, hi.
Hi.
Actually, there was one. I am Sumaya Dashti from the lettering pad. Hello.
Hi.
There's a small doubt before you start off writing. Uh, it is regarding the ratios. So, while you're doing the ratios of copper plate, is there any kind of a rule that the height and the weight ratio needs to be half or something like that? Because I've read it somewhere, so I was just curious
Yes.
to know.
Okay, so for the ratios, for copper plate, there are usually two different ratios that you can pick from. One is 2:1:2, and the other is 3:3. Okay, it really depends on the type of copper plate or round hand script. Let me just copy the chat again. It really depends on the kind of copper plate script that you're practicing. I believe usually for the American copper plate, which is Engrosser's script, you would do a 2:1:2 ratio. For me, I do more of like the British style copper plate. So the ratios that I work with is 3:3. So it boils down to the type of styles that you practice. I am not really focusing so much on, at the start when I'm practicing, I don't really at the start when I'm practicing, I pretty much follow the British style copper plate, but if I do my artwork for this exhibition, I do a mix of a little bit of engrosses plus copper plate, British copper plate kind of writing. So I feel that that's a little bit more modern looking style of copper plate. But depends on the end goal. What kind of style are you looking for? So generally you can go for 2:1:2 or 3:2:3. My preference is a 3:2:3, but I'm using a 2:1:2 just to show you how I use it for general practice today. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And regarding the spacing, like when you angle your 55-degree for the guidelines, does it need to be half of the like the excite that you're using? Like for example,
Half
if
of my
you're using,
excite.
yeah, like if suppose you're using a 6 mm excite, okay, so does the angle spacing needs to be around about 3 mm or something like that, or there's no specific focus regarding that?
Okay, so you're talking about the spacing here, is that correct?
Yeah, that spacing, even the 55-degree angle spacing, like when you make your guidelines,
Yep.
the 55 degrees angles that you draw,
Yeah,
the spacing,
like
yeah,
this?
that exactly, yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so does that need to be half of the excite, or there's no such rule as such?
This angled spacing doesn't really matter. It depends on how frequent you need these guidelines to help you when you're writing. So you can do it like this, which is what I have, or you can even do really tiny ones if that really helps you with keeping your writing slanted and consistent. Generally, I don't like too many slanted lines on my paper because I feel that it's a little bit distracting when I have too many lines right next to each other. But it is actually quite helpful to have, all these slanted guidelines really close to each other when you're maybe practicing a really short word. For example, let's say today if I'm focusing on practicing just three letters, I and E. The letters don't have to make sense, but I'm just going to practice refining just 3 letters. Then in such cases, I don't really mind having really tight guidelines around, so I can see how well I'm performing when I have all these letters next to each other, next to the slanted guidelines. Yeah, but if I'm, let's say, for today's instance where we are writing the whole poem, let me just write it down again in the chat. Today's instance where I'm writing this whole poem, I wouldn't bother so much with all these slanted guidelines. because it's a little bit distracting. When I'm writing, I tend to physically look at the spacing more than the guidelines themselves. So if I'm writing these 3 words, or maybe for the rest of the poem, I am focusing on the spacing I have in relation to one another. Oops, let me pull it down a little bit. So as I'm writing, I'm looking at, when I'm creating this space, I'm looking at the space at the back and see whether they sort of, look like each other. Yeah, so the guidelines are good once in a while if I'm writing a full text. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much. It was quite helpful.
No problem. Okay, so as I'm explaining, those that are familiar with all these, all these information about planted guidelines, you can just go on with the writing and practice. I think by the end of this, my paper will be quite messy because I've got demonstrations on.
Nick, just a random question. For your final pieces, do you have any recommendations on paper weight or type of paper that you use?
Paper weight. I've been using Arches hot pressed 300 GSM for my pieces. Arches, if you're unfamiliar, I'll type it in the chat. Arches hot press. Hot press watercolor paper. I find the paper a little bit smoother compared to the cold press paper, so it's really good with our pointed pens. It doesn't really, when you're writing, your pen doesn't skip. So hot press Arches. I work with 300 GSM paper. Yes, this is my go-to paper type when I'm doing art pieces.
Thank you.
No problem. We're doing copperplate writing today because I use primarily used copperplate for my exhibition pieces. So it'll be more relevant. Does anyone here do engrosser script? Out of curiosity. Not yet. If you do engrosser script, you'll see that a few, some of the ways I connect my letters and the angles are a little bit different because when I practice, I kind of follow the George Beckham's penman book. No, wait, George Beckham. What is it called? Universal Penman. Universal Pen. Let me just grab it. Show you guys. Yeah, if you guys have this. A lot of my reference are based off this book. So even with my letters, when I'm writing them, I write them a little bit different. Like for example, my V has this little loop at the end. I go back, instead of doing a standard compound curve, I actually loop it back on itself like this. So there's a little bit of a curve at the end here. So we do see that quite a bit in the penman book. I've adopted that style into my own writing.
We have a question. What brand of nib and ink do you recommend?
What brand of nib? Okay, nibs. I have plenty. Let me show you. Nibs, I normally use these three. Hunt 101. I use Principal EF extra fine, Leonard Principal extra fine, and I use Zebra G. Oops, RA and G. So those are the three brands that I typically use. I use based on different types of scenarios. So generally for a day-to-day practice, I do use Zebra. That's my daily. And then Principal EF. Principal EF, I normally use it for Principal EF and Hunt 101. I normally use them for commissions. Okay. The reason why I'm using Zebra G for day-to-day practice is only because it's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper to buy. In Singapore, when we buy a box of like 10 pieces, it costs around $18 Singapore dollars. I think it's around, how much is it in US dollars? 14, 15 US dollars, thereabouts. So in terms of cost, it's definitely a lot cheaper. Principal EF might go up to like $3 or $4 in Singapore. And a Hunt 101 thereabouts as well. So they are a lot pricier, perhaps even double the price. But I keep them for commission practice. Commission works. But I do take them out once in a while for practice. So I get myself used to the flexibility of the nibs. Because Zebra G is usually quite stiff. And Hunt 101 and Principal EF, they're a little bit more flexible in comparison. So they're harder to manage. So if you haven't done any practice with Hunt 101 or Principal EF before, you will definitely want to spend some time doing some practices with that. With the inks, the ink that I'm using today is actually this one. It's a fountain pen ink. It's a fountain pen ink by Pilot. It's called Iro Shizuku. It's one of my favorite inks for practice. Let me write it down. Oh, okay, Dorothy had it in chat. Yeah, Pilot ink, Iro Shizuku. I like the inks for my paper. It's really good because I can get really fine lines with the writing. Whereas in comparison, if I were to use Chinese Sumi ink, the ink comes out a little bit too thick, and it leaves a really dark residue on my nibs. So I don't like using Sumi ink that much unless a situation or a commission calls for it. But generally, Iroshizuku is good. I also use Higgins Eternal. I use Higgins Eternal for practice. And yes, Higgins Eternal ink for practice as well. So these are my two go-to inks. But honestly, there is no, just use whatever you can find in the art supply stores. I think that's the, if you don't have all these that I've recommended, anything you can find at art supply store is actually good. So what you can do is you can even use watercolor paints, add some water and gum arabic to it, and you can use it as your ink. You can use gouache as well. Gouache works. I have some tubes of gouache paints. And what else do I have? Walnut inks. I use walnut inks as well. I think I've seen some people, some calligraphers, they made their own walnut inks. So that was quite interesting. I might try it sometime. Yeah, so those are the calligraphy nibs and inks that I recommend. With gum arabic, let me look at the chat, see the amount of. Okay, so for the fountain pen ink that I'm currently using, I haven't added any gum arabic ink, gum arabic to it. So I'm using out of the bottle and it works okay on my paper. I think as long as the paper and ink is compatible, that's okay. I will really only add it if, let's say, I can only find a specific type of paper in my local supply stores. And the ink that I have doesn't really work very well with the paper that you can easily get, then I might consider adding some gum arabic to it.
Excuse me, Nichole.
Yes.
Maria speaking. I have a bit of a bad connection, so I missed a bit about the gum arabic. What does it actually do to the ink?
What I find with gum arabic, it helps hold the ink. Okay, so because it really depends on the type of paper you're working with. That's the first thing you want to be looking out for. With gum arabic, it helps bind the pigments or the ingredients in your ink better, so it holds well on the paper. It also really depends on the paper that you're working with. So let's say if when you're writing you find that you're getting some bleeding on paper, then the gum arabic might potentially help with the situation, but it might not do anything in some cases. So it's just a trial and error on your end. It helps bind the pigments. So an example would be in this exhibition, I actually used this powder, Prolax powder. Okay, I used this for my exhibition piece, and it comes in a pigment form. So if I were to add this powder with water and use it as a calligraphy ink, after it's dried and I sort of, wipe my paper, all the pigment will come off. It will come off the paper, and you have a lot of powder around your art piece. So the gum arabic is there to bind all these pigments together well, so that the pigments stay where it needs to be on paper. So that's the main purpose of the gum arabic in such cases. Yeah. So if you need, if you find you have paper ink compatibility issues, then maybe you can try doing that by adding gum arabic to your ink.
Thank you.
No problem. I missed the letter. Let me just cancel this.
Nick, out of curiosity, when you're making very, very big pieces, right? Do you have to make drafts for before you do the final piece? Because like I can imagine that you can't write a single letter wrong for the real piece.
when I'm actually doing bigger pieces, I tackle what I find the most difficult first. So for example, oh yeah, I have my piece to show you guys. I made 3 pieces for the exhibition, so it's one of 3 pieces. Okay, so for me, what I did with pieces like this, I'm not too sure if it's too bright. Let me just turn this on. Okay, it's a little bit better. It's not so bright. When I do pieces like this, I tackle the ones I find most difficult, and for me, it's the flourishes. The flourishing I have on top here. Not too sure if you guys can see. So there are really delicate flourishes around the title of the piece. I tackle that first when I'm doing a big piece like that. And then I tackle the ones that I find not as hard. And I won't make so many mistakes. It's based on the difficulty of the techniques. Or maybe depend on how confident I am with the different parts of the artwork. Other than that, I do have. Other than that, before I actually ink on the final piece, I do drafts on paper. I do them in a smaller sized paper. Maybe you can do it on like a A4 paper, A4, and then you can maybe go in a little bit larger with A3, and you can see your writing in different sizes, because when you are writing small, let's say in today's case, I'm using a 5 mmx height guide sheet. It will definitely look a little bit different when you're working with larger X heights. So even though you're very confident working with maybe a 5 mmx height piece of writing, you will definitely want to try and test things out on a much larger X height before you do your actual piece. Because writing big has got its own challenges as well. So you got to move your pen a little bit wider. You got to move, even with ascender loops, you got to go a bit further than you're normally used to. So you got to do all these tests and trial and error beforehand before you ink your final piece. So for me, fortunately, I do have different ways of tackling creating drafts. So one of them is I do digital mockups. And I only do that in recent 1 or 2 years with digital mockups. Digital mockups done on iPad. Okay, that's one way of doing draft. Before I started doing drafting on iPad, I actually did it on paper. So traditional way, pencil drafting on the actual size paper. On paper. I'll have draft for reference. And then I will have another artwork. So whenever I'm doing my actual art piece, I have a reference to look at. So I don't make any mistakes when I'm writing. Because for the final artwork, I don't actually like pencil marks on it. Yeah, I don't really like pencil marks on them because I find the graphite on paper really distracting. It doesn't really work very nicely with calligraphy inks. Sometimes inks might just glide off those spots that you have pen marks on. So as much as possible, I don't like to do like maybe a pencil draft on paper. So what I mean by pencil draft on paper is actually writing. For example, today's poem, I wouldn't write this out. I wouldn't write it fully on my artwork. Instead, I'll be writing this on my draft piece for reference.
So do you use a light pad for that?
Sorry,
Do
can you
you
repeat
use
your
a light?
question?
Yeah. Do you use a light pad for that then? Once you draft your piece for the final piece?
Okay, yes, you can use a light pad. You can use a light pad and put it beneath. It can be a little bit distracting sometimes. What I do with light pads is because I have my draft here. Okay. See, I have my draft here. Okay, so this is the draft paper. What I do is there will be a light pad beneath, and then I have another piece of paper that is the artwork. I place it on top. Okay, I will definitely use a pencil and draft out, draw the baseline at the minimum. I will have the baseline there when I'm on my actual artwork paper. And through the light pad, I can see the writing beneath it, right? So what I do is I mark out that my sentence is going to start from here. Is it blurred on screen? Whatever I'm sharing? Or is it okay?
A tiny bit. Better.
Right? Okay. So I'll mark out, this is the starting point of my text. And this is the ending point of my sentence. So I have a rough indication where it will start and where it will end for that line. And then I will remove the light pad and start writing thereafter. I don't really like to write with light, right in my right at me when I'm writing. So I try to eliminate the light pad segment as much as possible when I'm writing. I find it very, very distracting and uncomfortable for my eyes. So what I do is I just use that to mark out the start and the end of the sentence, and then I remove it and start writing for that sentence.
So you do your guidelines with pencil when you're drafting on the final paper?
Guidelines, yes, I do. I think that's the minimum that I have on paper in terms of pencil marks. Yeah.
Okay. I have seen many people use the laser light for the guidelines and not using the pencil, because even I have done a few commission letters where a few thick 300 to 400 GSM papers, the pencil marks don't seem to get off. So I've got recommendations of using a laser light for the guidelines. So what's your take on that?
I generally don't like light around me when I'm writing. So even laser lights are out of the question for me.
Okay, okay.
I find it very, very distracting.
Okay.
That's my personal preference. I mean, if it works for you, that's great. But I don't, when I'm writing, I don't like so much, external light happening around me, except for maybe the ceiling lights or my table lamp. I think that will be sufficient for writing.
We can let Nichole carry on with the writing. Then if you have questions, you can type it in the chat. Then when she pauses in between, we can direct all our questions at her. So we can help her to flow better. Is that good?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
Okay, can.
Here. Oops, I missed the mark there. I can hear some of your nibs scratching on paper. It's a really nice sound to me.
Did your docu-cam? Nichole, can you focus your document cam a bit? It's a bit out of focus. Yeah, thanks.
What are you guys doing?
Happily zoning out. I made a mistake
managed.
midway, so I had to restart.
That's the problem, right? If you want a complete, nice looking piece, we might make mistakes and start all over again.
Yes, you need to slowly write because I got distracted, so I wrote a wrong letter. So yes.
So maybe if you guys have problems with getting the spelling correct at the start, what you can do is you can write it out with a pencil first and use it as your reference and put it aside. So as you're writing, you have something to refer to, since everything's spelled out for you in a calligraphy manner, not in a type font on your computer. So you have calligraphy reference. I would have done a pencil draft beforehand. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, I'm moving on to the next poem. So,
Nick, if you have a tiny bit of
yes.
time, there was a request from Mo to demonstrate the R and S link bridge. The link between RS, yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
oh,
maybe
okay.
this is a good time for questions since you're in between.
Yep.
Oh.
So R and S. I normally do R and S. It depends on the type of R that I'm working with. I could, sometimes I use this R. Right? If I were to use this one, then the connection between an R and S will be R. I'll stop there and I'll start thinking about the connection to S. Pull out. This depends on the variation of letter S that you want to be working with. So there's one example. There's another letter R. Some of you might be using like this. If it's this version of R to S. Now to R. Normally when I do a RS connection, I'll pull the letter R, the tail of a letter R a little bit further than I'll normally do if it was a R to a simple oval base letter like a RI. I'll do a example over there, right next to it so you can see. Let's say if I were to do a RI, then my spacing is, here is a little bit closer, whereas if I were to do a RS, I'll pull it a little bit more. Whoops. I'll pull it a little bit further than I would normally do. Same thing for this version RS. I'll slant it a little bit further so I can fit an oval form. I'll use a pen. Pull it a little bit further so I can fit the oval shape here. And then there's an oval in the R here. Something like that in terms of spacing. Then the other question is, what do I mean by digital mockup? Digital mockups I use, if I do digital mockups, it'll be on an iPad, on Procreate. And I only do that just to have a, look at how everything looks on the screen. So I have a reference to look at. But from the iPad to the paper, I don't really do that much in terms of, you know, because it has to be done on a much bigger piece of paper at the end of the day, at least for my pieces that I've done for the exhibition. So I only use the iPad mockups as a visual reference. So I know what I have to do for my final art piece. Yeah, so that's what I do with the digital mockup. I use Procreate. Okay, if you have an iPad, you can use that. There are calligraphy brushes in there where you can do like thick and thin lines and replicate copperplate fonts or styles. So you will need an Apple Pencil if you were to use an iPad for the digital mockup. Okay. There.
Just now, Maria had a question about if there is time she wants to see your process or something like that. Am I right, Maria? It was an unfinished question.
Into the.
I don't think it was me.
Okay, flourishes and embellishment.
Flourishes and embellishments. Ah, okay. When I do flourishes and embellishments, you mean the one in the title? Like the ones on, yes, the ones in the title. Okay. I will normally when I do that, I will know the title of the piece. I'll know the title. By the way, if you guys have finished the first poem, I have the second poem in the chat. So you can continue and you know, do some writing as I'm explaining. If this part doesn't really apply to what you're looking for. Okay, so when I plan my flourishes, I always know what the title, the text I'm working with. So I will definitely have that written out. And I sort of plan around the title. So some titles have multiple lines. You know, some titles are done in one single line. Some are done in 2 lines. So you sort of have to plan how many sentences or how many lines do you want your title to be. And then I will design my flourishes around those lines. In general, when I design my flourishes, I kind of like to keep them in a oval shape design. So for example, if my my title is done in one sentence or one line like this, then I'll try to do up a design for the embellishments where everything is done, you know, within this imaginary oval space on top. And if I were to do my title text in 2 lines or more, let's say if I have 2 separate lines like this, then I have an imaginary oval space like that. And I try to plan my flourishes like this around it, you know. So it sort of fits around that whole oval space. So visually, when you complete the, at least the title portion, it looks quite balanced because there is a form or structure that people and everyone that's looking at it is familiar with, which is an oval shape on top. Whereas if you were to do a title like this, let's say there were 2 lines for the title, and you have a flourish, let's say done like here, and then you have something that is like that. No, I'm just randomly drawing shapes. It will look kind of out of place. Yeah, okay, a little bit out of place. So we're talking about balance when I'm doing the title flourishes design. When it comes to the embellishments, for this piece I've done. Okay, yeah, this piece. For this piece I've done specifically with the embellishments at the side. I do a lot of inspiration research. So even before I decided to do this this design, I actually went to the museum to have a look at things. I do take down notes of things that I think were quite interesting in my day-to-day life. And I find that whole process quite important for the final artwork, because as I'm actually doing or thinking about creating the artwork piece, as I'm thinking about creating the artwork piece, all these experiences I've had picked up, in the past few weeks prior to the actual creation stage, are potential ideas for the final artwork. So I won't be able to show you guys, but I have a notepad in my iPhone where I take down little notes. Where I take down little notes about little things that were quite interesting to me. So the embellishment that I've done for that specific piece that I've shown you just now were actually altar cloth designs. Altar cloths? Yeah, because the intention of that piece I've done there was for it to look like a tombstone, sort of like a tombstone design. So I wanted this this element in my piece. So that's how I've decided to add that in to the design. Otherwise, the general structure of the artwork. Yes, thank you, Judith. You've put the link there. Otherwise, the general structure of the piece, which you see, has got this shape here. Yeah, this shape, and the outer cloth were at the side, right? The floral designs at the side. The shape that you have here, this one, I have actually based it off. I based it off the shop houses in Singapore. Because it was during one of my dinner trips with my family to the east side of Singapore. I stay in the west. And yeah, so I walked past some of the shop houses at Joo Chiat area, east of Singapore, and I took a photo. So that was my visual reference when I decided to, put that into my artwork. So I think when it comes to deciding what sort of design you want for your pieces, you got to consider, be more aware of the things around you, I guess. No problem. Yeah.
So maybe everyone, it's past the hour. So if you want to leave, feel free. You may do so. The rest will want to stay behind and keep on writing. Please do. Yeah.
Dorothy, were there a lot of people this afternoon?
No, not really. Like maybe
okay.
6 or 7. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not too bad then.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's enough of us that are mesmerized by your lettering, Nichole. It's been very,
thank you.
it's a wonderful day to start off a morning watching you just work. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks, Susan.
Actually, for those who do not know, Nichole took the Universal Penman and she made copies. She copied the lettering, she studied it in detail. She wrote them again and again until she could study copy the letter forms and study them. So Nichole is an extremely diligent student of the Universal Penman. I've seen her do that for years. Making copies out of the book.
Yeah, I guess that's why
she and
John
another calligrapher called John, they will compete to see, who could make a more accurate copy. And then they will ask our opinion. So which one is closer? Which one is more like? Yeah, and so
that is friendly competition.
Yes, very friendly. So it's really amazing because English roundhand, which is represented in the Universal Penman, not many people teach it the way that it is written. So yeah, so Nichole has a very faithful, yeah, I think it's very faithful to the classical universal penman pen.
But I think when it comes to my current writing, because I do commission works, and if I were to do that in the universal penman style, it's not very legible. It's not as legible in
Like
a
the
modern
long
day
S.
times. Yeah, even if let's say for example a letter W. Did I do it here? I might have done it somewhere. Okay. Anyways, the W in the penman book actually looks like this. Someone like that. Yeah, so this is how W is written in the penman book. So, you know, if I were to use this in a modern day context, not many people will be able to recognize. So what I find is with my writing, I do evolve. Even if I use the penman as my initial reference, I do pick out what are the things I like from the reference and use them. I use the examples I actually enjoy. For example, like what I mentioned, my V's. I like to have that little curve on top. I find it really I find it very exciting. When I do my VEs, I have that little bit of a curve to the end. Instead of a standard compound curve where you're meant to do everything on the calligraphy slant. So I guess, you know, if you start off with a reference book, I guess there's no exact right or wrong. I do like to pick out elements that I enjoy and apply it to my final style that I use on a day-to-day basis.
Do you use Eleanor Winters as a mentor for Copperplate then, rather than Iamphith, or is it a combination?
Actually, Eleanor's writing is more towards the British style. Instead of the Iamphith, they have got the more American style Copperplate, right? So I would say my style skews towards Eleanor's version rather than the Iamphith version. They're both valid styles. I believe at the end of the day, you got to decide, and if you're just starting out with Copperplate writing, you got to decide which style would you want to start off with, and just stick with it first. You know, just stick with it, go through with it, and then you can evolve your style as you go along, as you pick up different references along the way. You see different calligraphers doing different ways of different variations of a letter A or B or C, and then you apply it in your own writing. All right, no problem.
Heather Held
Yes?
reminded us that there was a lot of drawing work in the Universal Penman, and that you can't necessarily create those letter forms first time out. So it's like you are adopting a personal approach, which helps you to letter. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, thank you for sharing your
No
process.
problem. I've got ink on my fingers too. Hold on. Can you please show us how? Okay, TV says, can you please show us how to write capital E and Z? I can do that. Just wait a second. Okay, let's see. Capital E. Okay, I'll do a skeleton version first. Skeleton version of it. Letter E, I do it like this. There are different ways of doing it. There's an E, and then when it comes to Z, so in the letter Z, the standard one that you might have seen on, I'm not too sure if I did it correctly. Something like this. I don't ever use this version, so I'm not too sure. Could be something like that. If anyone that does this version, you can maybe show how it looks like. I don't ever do this style on this version of a letter Z because it's not legible, so I don't like to use it. I kind of adopted a lowercase c, a lowercase letter C, and just enlarged it for my own use. A letter E, yep, a letter E looks like this. No problem. I think I'll do probably, let's see, I'm on tell it all, tell it plan. I'll end off, okay, let me just copy it in the text. Then maybe I'll end it off at maybe success in circuit life. Okay. Then we can all rest and prepare for the day if you're wherever you are. So if it's in the morning, it'll be a start of the day. And for the rest of us, that's the night time. You've got to prepare for bedtime. It all tell it slant. Okay.
I think some people are waiting for the auction to close before they
yes, yes.
waiting for the chance to
That's
snipe.
true. I've got a piece I'm eyeing. I'm gonna snipe it.
Nichole, I've got a question.
Yes.
Aarti here. How do you preserve your pieces? The large piece that you showed, it's, you know, how do you preserve them?
Actually end them off with a fixative spray.
Yeah.
Yeah, I seal it off. I seal off my pieces with a spray. And then afterwards I will keep, because I've bought a really large portfolio folder big enough to fit my artworks in there.
Okay. I was just
that-
wondering because if it's an A3, I understand we get folders to put that in.
Yeah.
Yours seems to be much larger than an A3.
Yeah. So the piece I've done for the exhibitions, they were 50 by 70 cm. So I've gotten folders that were large enough to fit them in.
Okay.
And I do put in some what do you call them? I'm not too sure, but in Singapore we have little small little packet with white beads in there. Do you know what it's called?
Silica.
Oh, okay. The
Beads, silica beads.
silica sachet to
Yeah,
absorb the
yeah.
moisture.
Yeah.
Okay,
I put them in the folders as well.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I actually put them in a trunk. There's
Trunk?
yeah, I've got a trunk. So it's pretty large. I mean, my pieces are not as big as yours, but and I can't put a gilded piece into a folder or a file.
That's true. That's true.
So I wrap them up in a glassine paper. And I put them in a trunk with these silica pouches.
Yeah. Do you have to sort of pop them up? Yeah.
Please continue first. I'll ask you a question later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we have a question about fixative. Like, what brand do you use? Because the ones I use, they tend to have a white residue as
There's in circuit lights. The one that I use, it's in storage right now. I got it from Art Friend. Let me see if I can find let me finish up the sentence. I'll have a look at let me look on the internet if I can find the exact brand that I used. Just a second. When I put my things in storage, it's really difficult to find them. So I think it's quicker if I were to look for it on the internet and Google it. Let me do a quick. I think it's this one. Do I copy this? It's the Krillin brand. Blair Low Odor Fixative. What's a Blair? Let me look at the brand that Susan suggested. It's Blair Low Odor Fixative. So when it comes to materials, it's a little bit tricky because it really depends on whether you can find that brand or do the local art supply stores actually carry them. I've not seen Blair before. Let me copy this and put it in the chat. Everyone can see how it looks like. Okay, so this is the one Susan suggested. I think the one I've been using is called this brand Krillin. Fixative. Can we copy images in Zoom? Do you guys know?
copy images. You can
Probably not, right? Okay, let me just copy the link then. This one. This is the one that I've been using. The second link is the one I've been using. Only because it's readily available locally, so I use them. I've not seen Blair in our local stores. Have you, Judith or Dorothy, seen
No,
it before?
we
No,
haven't
right?
seen it
Yeah,
before.
no.
Yeah.
I think the concern was for the chemical component and making sure that you use something that's the
Yes,
best that you
yes.
can do,
That's
even
right.
if you're outside spraying that. And I believe there was something about it doesn't yellow as well over time.
Yeah, okay.
So that's part of it as well too. So you can look at both.
That sounds amazing.
Have a look at this brand Blair. I need to save this. Because if the pieces yellow over time, that's a major concern, especially if you're doing, precious artwork.
That's right.
And it's true. I've used other sprays by Krylon. I don't think I used the workable one, but I used another one, and I should have tested it on a different paper before I did it on a final piece. It left all sorts of white residue on my final piece.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll try this one.
Okay. Nick, is it okay if I stop the recording here?
Yes.
Okay.